Hi, everybody, and welcome to this month's fan meetup for Toronto. And we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons again. I'm one of your hosts, Jeremy Johnston.
And I'm the other host, Angelo Corsino.
And we're also with Unite the Factions, which is a community group in the Greater Toronto area that runs Dungeons and Dragons Adventures League. So, whenever we talk about Dungeons and Dragons, we usually have a bit of a lens as it relates to Adventures League as well.
It's basically our bread and butter.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It allows us to, have portable characters that can move from game to game, event to event, table to table. And it makes it really easy to, find time to play that works for you and continue a character's adventure, when you don't necessarily have enough time to play, or maybe you just really like the really cool storylines that they have that are kind of adjacent to a lot of the hardcovers, or they're, fresh and new or written by the community as well. And then there's also epics, which are multi-table interactive adventures that we like to run.
And now that we've given our Adventures League spiel, this week we're talking about magic items.
Yes, and we love magic items.
We do.
I don't know anyone who doesn't like magic items and wants to hoard them all like a dragon. And just a reminder before we jump in, feel free to put anything either in the chat here while we're recording live, or of course, once we put this up on YouTube, feel free to throw something into the comments and, be kind. I do read the comments.
I don't.
No. Well, I get notifications, of course. And the other thing too is, this is meant to be family friendly. So if we can keep that in mind, then we're all good to go. So yeah, getting back to our topic for the month, magic items. So, listening to, Dragon Talk, the podcast and, the video interviews that they often have between Greg Tito and Jeremy Crawford. Jeremy has, said in the past, not me, the other Jeremy, the rules designer, said that you don't really absolutely need magic items to, kind of play D&D and go through, all the different levels of play.
And I'm here to tell you that is completely incorrect. Because the first time you hit level 5 and you fight something with magic immunity, you are angry.
Oh, beyond angry. I mean, you could be level 20. You can be a champion fighter that's critting on 18s with, 4 or more attacks per turn.
Doesn't matter a single one of them if it's not magical damage and you're fighting a werewolf.
Yeah, it's just
CR3 will eventually kill you.
Yeah. I mean, not everybody's a paladin. I mean, because your smites, of course, are going to do magic damage, but, your weapon's not doing magic damage, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But, I mean, you could be cool like a monk, and the higher level you are, your attacks become magical and can get, by, some of the resistances or invulnerabilities.
Yeah, because there's a ton of creatures that are either resistant or invulnerable to mundane wet damage, and therefore magic items such as +1 weapons, moon-touched weapons, the common staves from Xanathars, anything like that will allow you to overcome this magic resistance and not be completely outdone by a single creature that has immunity.
And sometimes you can also use silvered weapons to beat some of those immunities, and those are still considered mundane or not magical. But as soon as you get into materials like adamantine or mithril, then those are definitely magic items because you require magic to craft them. So while they might not be +1 or +2 or +3 items, in terms of the bonuses that they give on top of either the armor class or the roll to hit or attack, they're still magical.
So the other reason why we obviously want magic items is because magic items are a ton of fun. They add so much just interesting little things to the game that they're just so much fun. So Jeremy, this is your forte more than mine. Where do magic items come from?
Well, I mean, it really depends. At the end of the day, it's obviously going to come from your dungeon master. But if we're talking about in the game, and we're talking about Forgotten Realms specifically, where a lot of 5th edition has been set. A lot of the magic items that you will find in dungeons are pretty ancient, actually, and were created by one of those Forgotten Realms called Netheril, which is, of course, if anyone knows me, I love the Netherese. And they were they're way cooler than the Red Wizards of Thay. They were dealing with and discovering all kinds of magic that everyone, at least the players, take for granted in the current timeline of the Forgotten Realms, and they created a lot of magic items. And so a lot of those that you come across are those that they've created, and some of them are even named after them, and you wouldn't even know it, like an Iron Stone. Yeah. So, and of course, a lot of spells get their names from some of these famous wizards as well.
All right. So when it comes to magic items, in general, in a campaign sense, can you buy them? And the answer to that is if your DM allows you as some mechanic for purchasing magic items. There isn't really a mechanic for that. That's very widespread in 5th edition. The only two that I can think of where they happen are in
Saltmarsh.
Yeah, in Saltmarsh, exactly. That was the word I was looking for. When you're you can requisition some items and they have a cost that they're associated with them based on what is rolled that day. And the only other place that I can think of that I've seen a magic item for sale was in one specific Adventures League module where you could buy a cap of water breathing for 1,000 gold.
That's pretty cool.
But other than that, there's no other like mechanic for buying them. But your DM could obviously put in, using Xanathar's Guide to Everything, some sort of system in which they can be procured.
Yeah, I mean it's really tricky too when it comes to magic items, because I can remember in my youth or in my teenage years that we would just hoard magic items and DMs would give them out like candy. But of course, when you do stuff like that, you better be ready to deal with those sorts of kind of problems and scale the game to match. Otherwise, it's going to be a cakewalk in a lot of different cases. But there's also some rules surrounding magic items in terms of the numbers of items that you can attune to. And usually if you're attuning to a magic item, you're spending at least an hour to do so. Although some magic items can be done instantly if they say so. But generally speaking, if you don't know what a magic item is, it's kind of unidentified. You spend an hour with it, you find out what it is, and you can attune to it if it requires attunement, and then you know how to use it. It's part of the beauty of magic items. And
that's also sometimes how you can find out that they're cursed.
Unfortunately, yeah. And then you either gotta hope that you have a cleric that's high enough level to remove that curse, or you're gonna have to, maybe that's even a quest. Or maybe you like the curse, because some of the curses are actually kind
of some of the curses aren't that bad.
Yeah. If you're going to go into Berserker kind of rage with, you
just make sure that your party is really far away from you.
Definitely, yeah. It's going to be hack and slash everything in sight.
And as from an Adventure League standpoint, other than that exactly one specific module that I talked about where there was a single cap of water breathing for sale, there's no purchases in magic items, but that's okay because Adventures League magic items basically grow on trees.
Oh, they certainly do. But I guess in terms of the three different types of play, there's the hardcover books or pre-written adventures that you can run with, and they will have magic items kind of littered through them that scale well with the adventure. You probably don't
sometimes
need to add. You probably don't need to add a lot of magic items if you're running a hardcover book, and sometimes either in a hardcover book, or if you're running your own homebrew or your own written world or built world, you might use the magic item tables that are in the Dungeon Master's Guide. It has different lists and tables that you can kind of roll through across the various tiers of play to kind of help you, kind of place magic items that are appropriate to the different levels of play.
And there's also different tables that allow you to like create hordes that have like gold and items and like art objects and all sorts of things that DMG has in there.
You can craft magic items, can't you, Angelo?
You can crafting magic items. The system for it from Xanathar's Guide to Everything and in the DMG is actually very vague. And I think it's done intentionally so because they're going to want you to figure out how to do that on your own rather than give you a complete rule set. Generally, speaking, anybody who has skill in Arcana can craft magic items as per Xanathar's Guide to Everything.
Yeah.
And they just take varying amounts of time and gold and or some time. They say that or magical ingredients. But they don't give you what any of those magical ingredients are. That's all on you to figure out.
Yeah, and you can build, a large part of any campaign around, potential need to craft an item to defeat some foe or something.
That's a very classic storyline.
Right? Yeah, for sure. Or, maybe it's a rite of passage for an artificer to, craft an item or something like that, that's, extraordinary.
Yeah, because artificers can get this really cool ability at level 10 where they can craft magic items for a quarter of the cost, and it's really fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like crafting magic items is practically the name of the class, right? You're making artifacts, right?
So magic items are broken up into 6 different tiers or rarities or basically scaling levels of power. Some items are mistiered 100%. Other items are where they should be. Generally, they're tier 0, common magic items. Tier 1, uncommon magic items. Tier 2, rare items. Tier 3, very rare items. Tier 4, legendary items. And then last but not least, Tier 5, which are artifacts, one-of-a-kinds, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and again, when it comes to, power creep and, OP stuff ending up in your campaign, as a dungeon master, you really got to watch what you add because, like Angelo said, some even uncommon or rare items are quite potent.
Oh yeah, and then there are legendaries where you're like, why would I ever want this?
Yeah. No, that's very true. It's just like, why is this legendary? I really don't know.
I'd rather have. There are a few legendaries that I would rather have certain common items over.
Right. Yeah. Yeah,
But
and
that's
everyone
just,
will have their preferences.
of course, everyone you can always find use for something. And you know what? If the DM wants to take one of those items that I consider not great and create something incredible that item can be used for in their story, then that's absolutely perfect.
Yeah. And just a reminder too, if you did want to ask any questions in the chat about anything that we're discussing, or if you want to ask about any particular magic item or combinations, there is a Q&A tab that's available in the chat that you can use.
And I love answering questions about all things magic items. It's one of the things I really enjoy about this game.
Yeah. So if you're looking for where to find magic items as a reference, though, where would you look?
As a reference, you can find them in a couple of different places. Most of them are in the DMG.
What's the DMG?
The Dungeon Master's Guide.
Oh, okay.
The other common magic items are mostly in Xanathar's Guide to Everything.
Mm-hmm.
Each hardcover has their own certain few sets of really like hardcover exclusive items, where like those are the only items you'll find in the you'll only find those items in that hardcover. They're not in the DMG. They're not in any other books. And Tasha's Cauldron of Everything added a ton of really cool magic items.
Even new classes of magic items.
Yeah,
So
they're very it was a very, very interesting resource book for new magic items. It was actually quite cool to see what was in there.
So the player's handbook also has some magic items, but they're fairly mundane. Although some of the most powerful magic items are in the player's handbook because
those would be like the artifacts and
scrolls.
No, that's true too.
None of the actual items are statted anywhere, but yeah, scrolls is really it, and potions of healing.
Mm-hmm.
are a magical item as well. So if you're using like detect magic, any of these things are going to be detected as magical items.
So we have a question. So if you're creating characters with a standard or what seems to be representative set of magic items having been accumulated over a few levels of adventuring, what do you suggest?
Yeah.
So that is going to be incredibly dependent on actual the actual character that is being given magic items, because magic items for a sorcerer and magic items for a paladin are two completely different things.
Yeah.
Like for spellcaster, there you can always give them things like a pearl of power, and then no spellcaster is ever upset to have like a cloak of protection, even or
Yeah.
something like that.
Or wand of the war mage.
Yeah, casual. Or if you're like a spell slinger, like you can like to cast firebolt or chromatic orb or something like that. Wand of the war mage is really good. If you're a warlock, rod of the pack keeper, it's
Definitely.
very dependent on, as even like certain classes, like for example, a warlock, like I just said, they may not even have Eldritch Blast because they might be a blade lock that likes to Eldritch Smite things, and then they're going to want different things than
For
regular
sure.
warlock. So for in terms of a generic magic items, everybody likes Bag of Holdings. Everybody likes anything that increases armor or saving throws is very good, just as
Yeah, like
in a
having a
generic
plus one
sense.
weapon for
Yeah, any
anyone that's
martial
using
class
weapons.
plus one weapon for
You
sure.
know, yeah, if you are starting at levels like 5 through 10. But it's also a good idea to have like a session 0 before you start playing the campaign, talk about the characters that you're building and the relationships and such. And, have a discussion with the players as to, what expectations are for magic items. Since, if they're adventurers that have been adventuring around for a few levels, they probably do have at least one or two magic items each.
Yeah, so in a box, generic thing you can give to any character is something to up their attack bonus. So either a plus one weapon, a wand of the war mage, that sort of thing.
Or
A
consumables too.
bag of holding, and a cloak of protection, and you've got some decent spread of items already. The higher tier items are a little bit more niche, and they're going to be a little bit more character specific.
Yeah. But also throwing in, some like a potion of heroism or a higher level scroll or something like that might also be useful. Like a scroll of raised dead if you're that type of DM.
All right, so
So we've been talking about some of the types of magic items beyond just the rarities. So um, in terms of the types of magic items, they're generally classified by they are weapons, they are armor, they are consumables, or they're kind of wondrous items. And there's sometimes a bit of crossover in between these kind of categories or types of magic items. But that's generally what they are. And we've already started talking about weapons. So like the uncommon uh, uh, magic weapon that you see most often is like a plus one weapon plus, and then at the higher rarities they become plus two, plus three. Those are probably the weapons that any melee or ranged fighter or ranger is going to be looking for.
absolutely.
Same with armor.
Yeah.
If you have a lot of people that are wearing armor, they might want the plus one, plus two, plus three. In fifth edition, that's about as far as it goes in terms of the more generic items. Nothing
Yeah,
is
plus three is the
general,
highest that you're
pretty
going to find.
much. Yeah, and even there, plus three isn't a massive bonus.
It's
Um,
enough most of the time.
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, whereas some, people that are playing in like, cosmic or epic campaigns might feel the need to push it to plus four, plus five if they're creating their own. It's
Yeah,
probably the easiest magic items to scale a bit if you need to.
if you needed to. Bounded accuracy in fifth edition is so crazy anyway. When you got plus
Yeah,
17 to hit at level 20, it's hard to miss a lot of the times.
for sure.
Um, but you still can. 5% chance to miss on anything, but that's neither here nor there.
Mhm.
So scrolls. Let's talk a little bit about scrolls, because consumables like potions are fairly self-explanatory. You have a potion, you drink it, it will give you some sort of benefit,
Yeah,
whether it's a
and then you'll
simple
have a
potion of
duration.
healing or it's an incredibly powerful potion of speed. which allows you to basically have concentration-free haste for a minute.
Yeah.
But scrolls are a little bit more complicated because people get these wrong quite often in terms of how the rules work. Obviously, the DM can change them if they wish, but just in
For
a general
sure.
standpoint.
Yeah, because I mean, in most video games that are RPGs, if you pick up a scroll, it's probably a single player game, or maybe it's, you know, like a co-op game or something like that. And you pick up a scroll, you can use it. That's not true in D&D.
Yep, in D&D, if you get a scroll, in order to cast it, you need to have it on your spell list. Unless, very specifically, you're a thief rogue or you're an artificer who is level 14.
Yeah, and having it on your spell list is what is the super important part. You know, if you don't have a class ability that gives you spell casting and a list to go with it, if you know a spell by some other means, like a racial ability that doesn't necessarily allow you to cast with that scroll because you don't have a spell casting list to work from, which is why, like you said, Angelo, these other class or subclass abilities are so potent.
Mm-hmm. So generally, when you're casting a scroll, it's so basically, let's pick a spell at random. Let's pick Fireball. Fireball is a 3rd level spell, and it is on several different spell lists. It's on the Wizard list, it's on the Warlock list. For if you're a Fiend Warlock, it's on the
Correct.
Sorcerer
Yeah.
list. It's on a couple of different lists. It's on the Bard list if you're a Lore Bard at level 6. So basically, when you're casting, if you wanted to cast Fireball from a scroll, and if you weren't a 5th level spellcaster, so if you were say you were 3rd level, you only have 2nd level spells. If you wanted to cast Fireball with a 3rd level scroll, you would need to make a spellcasting ability check, DC 10, plus the spell level. So it would be DC 13 for Fireball. If you hit 13, you cast a spell as normal. If you hit under that, the spell scroll fizzles and you've lost
And
the
it's
ability to use
lost.
that scroll. It's gone.
Yeah. So when you get that wish scroll at low level, chances are you're not going to be able to use it.
Go
So
for that Hail Mary if you need it, but
yes, and use inspiration, bardic inspiration, like
guidance, all the things.
get everything set up if you really need that scroll. I mean,
So,
especially if it's raised dead and you don't want to burn that when you need it.
and if you're a thief rogue, for example, when you're hit level 13, it breaks all of the kind of barriers for magic items. So you don't need to have it on your spellcasting list anymore to read from a scroll. But your spellcasting ability modifier is automatically 0 because you don't have spellcasting.
True. But like you did mention there, it breaks all the rules for magic items, because there are some rules for magic items that we didn't quite touch on, in that certain magic items can be used or attuned only by certain classes. And that thief rogue subclass ability can be used to circumvent that.
Same with 14th level artificers. You don't even look at those anymore because you can attune to whatever you want.
Yeah, and that's a class ability, not a subclass ability. So if you want to go crazy with magic items, be an artificer.
Because you can attune to 6 of them at 20th level.
Bonkers. It's double what anyone else can.
You want to be dual wielding a staff of the Magi and a Holy Avenger. You're an artificer.
Crazy. Oh wow.
All right, so now,
well, one other thing about scrolls, though, before we move on, Angelo, because
sure.
I love wizards, right?
That's
my favorite class. Okay, so scrolls can be copied into spell books for wizards, as well as for ritual casters, and certain warlock, packs. We will talk about that.
We'll get to Black Razor. Don't worry, it's on our list.
Sorry about the interruption there, but yeah. When you're copying a spell into your spell book as a wizard, not only does it take time, not only does it take gold to purchase, the special inks and such, but there is also a DC, same as casting from a spell scroll, that you need to beat to be able to write it into your spell book. And again, if you don't make that check, then that scroll is going to fizzle, and you might as well crumple up your paper and throw it out from your spell book because it's not going to work either.
Yep, and that gold that you just had is gone.
Spent. Yeah. Oof. I mean, it's rare that you're going to, roll very poorly when doing that sort of thing, especially at the lower levels, because chances are you're really not going to find a lot of scrolls per se. I mean, again, it's up to your DM. You're probably just learning as you go and level up, but yeah, again, have somebody touching you and maybe giving you some guidance,
giving you a little bit of bardic inspiration.
Yeah, actually, and it's tricky too, because again, depending on your DM, they might say, well, guidance only lasts for a minute and you're writing for hours. So
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the most complicated and most interesting, in my opinion, category of magic items are the wondrous items, because they make up the bulk of the magic items.
For sure. And it's basically everything else that's not a
Yeah.
weapon armor or a consumable.
Yep.
I mean, some of them are consumable, but not necessarily scrolls
or potions.
Yeah.
So just basically anything that's a general item, like a bag of holding or a cloak of protection or a manual of quickness of action or such, are all considered wondrous items, as are the various runes from Storm King's Thunders and the new magical tattoos from Tasha's.
Yep, correct. Yeah. It's just a bucket of goodness and evil.
Some of them are evil, but
or cursed, as we said.
So that's basically brings us to what we're going to talk about, some of the more interesting magic items. If there's a magic item that we don't talk about that you want to hear about, or if you're like we already had someone touching on Black Razor, if there are any items that you're not quite sure how they work or how best to use it, say you found something in your game recently, just drop it in the Q&A and we can talk about that pretty quickly too.
Yeah, and we are also going to talk about some funny magic items or combinations that are just ridiculous or fun.
So first off, we have everybody's silly favorite magic item of choice, which is the Alchemy Jug. Now, the Alchemy Jug can make you a whole bunch of different things every day.
Yeah.
Everyone loves the mayonnaise.
Yeah, the mayonnaise is the big joke. You can pour out 2 gallons of mayonnaise. I mean, there's also beer, honey, vinegar, oil, water, of course, fresh or salt water, and wine. But mayo, like I just don't know mayo.
The urban legend around the mayo is that they put on a whole no ranch dressing, just mayo. But yeah, the joke is that they were spitballing the different things that could be possibly going into the Alchemy Jug while they had been imbibing a little bit, as well as it was like 3:00 in the morning and mayonnaise was on the list and they never took it off.
Oh boy.
That's how mayonnaise got in there, according to the urban legend.
Okay, well, I guess somebody wanted to make sandwiches or something.
2 gallons of mayonnaise a day.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
For all of you non-Americans, that's like almost 8 liters.
Yeah, that's crazy. Way too much. Yeah, and we had talked about the next one we wanted to mention a couple times already, and that's the bag of holding. It's a great item for a party to have at least one of these, because especially if you're using encumbrance rules, which a lot of people ignore, but if whether you do or don't, where are we going to put all these magic items? Where are we going to put all the loot?
How are we going to hold all of our magic items?
Yeah, so you're going to want a bag of holding, but also like it could be a secret weapon.
Yes, there is what we like to call bag of holding singularity generator.
Totally. Yeah, and this is a combo that a few items can kind of work in conjunction with. So whether you have two of these items or a combination of two of these items, being the Bag of Holding, Heward's Handy Haversack, or the Portable Hole, if you have two of those together, something super magical is going to happen.
Yep. So effectively, what happens when you mix these things together is that everything within a certain radius of it gets actively just jammed into it and sucked into the astral plane.
Yeah, so you can do some really, fun stuff with it. I mean, maybe you're up against the big bad evil guy and somebody wants to try to do this trick and sacrifice themselves potentially. Or maybe it's a high level campaign and someone's casting time stop while they do this. Because, it's not necessarily an attack, right?
Nope. And it's not a
So,
spell either that influences
no,
somebody else.
exactly. So this is a killer combo with time stop.
So the other one that I've seen you used once in one of my games to incredible effectiveness was one person had a sprite familiar and one person had an imp familiar, and both of them were invisible, and they ran into each other in front of a group of enemies and just sucked them all into the astral plane.
Sure.
And then
Dismiss your familiar, bring your familiar back.
they don't die; they just go to the astral plane. So the wizard and the warlock just did this twice, and their familiars were back in front of them.
Yeah, and if it's high level, you could sacrifice yourself if you have the spell.
Yeah, you could always plane shift back.
Exactly.
But there's also no guarantee that the enemy is not going to plane shift back at that level.
Correct. Yeah.
I've done that
And
one too. That's really fun.
yeah, but I mean, when the Tarask is running down the hill towards the city,
Make it the astral planes problem.
yeah, exactly, because
It doesn't give a size limit. It just sucks everything in that
it's any
radius.
creature or anything within 10 feet type of thing, right? So
Yep.
it's not a size restriction. So I mean, you can certainly have a lot of fun with it.
It's exactly 0 because if you try to put a bag of holding into another one, it gets sucked into the astral plane.
Yeah, and
To
effectively
your question
destroying
in
the
chat.
item as well. Yeah.
So next we get to one of my favorite categories in items, and these are items that I like to call jank glue. Because they let you, particularly in Adventures League, but in theory, you could do it. You could hope in a campaign that you're going to find something along these lines. But in Adventures League, these items grow on trees, so you know you're going to get them eventually if you want them. So you can plan to have these as part of your builds. These items are the ones that set your stats to a certain number. Like the Gauntlets of Ogre Power set your strength to 19. The Belts of Giant Strength set your strength score from anywhere between 21 and 29, depending on how strong of a Giant's Belt you have. The Headband of Intellect sets your intelligence to 19. And the Amulet of Health sets your constitution to 19.
Yeah.
Now, why are these so interesting? So if you set yourself up with 13 intelligence, and you multi-class into Blade Singer, for example, because now in Tasha's, Blade Singer is unlocked for everyone, not just elves. You can give yourself a Headband of Intellect, and as long as you're not wearing heavy armor or holding a weapon in two hands, you can have Blade Song with +4 int.
Yeah, right away.
Right away. You can do things like in Adventures League, like set your Constitution score to 8, and know you're going to get an Amulet of Health to make it 19, so you can put those important stats in other places.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing.
The important thing to remember too is that if you get that Amulet of Health at a later level, you still gain all of the bonuses at level up to your hit points when you put that on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then the Belt of Giant Strength just make things like Great Weapon Master so easy to turn on. When you get the Belt of Fire Giant Strength, for example, you have +7 strength. You add that to your proficiency bonus. Maybe you're holding a +3 Great Axe, and now you're swinging with Great Weapon Master at like +10 or 11. It's just amazing.
Yeah, and you can put that on a class that doesn't necessarily, normally, have a high strength, like a wizard or a sorcerer or something like that. and then they can start swinging around with any weapon with a really high strength stat.
I have a wizard that does that. It's fun. He's got a belt of Storm Giant strength, so he's got 29 strength as a wizard, and he hits people with the Staff of Power. 20th level characters, they're pretty silly.
Yeah, because at level 1, you have that quarter staff to start, but you are proficient with it, but you probably aren't very strong enough that you're, necessarily going to be doing a lot of damage with it until you find an item like that.
So next, Jeremy, why don't we talk about two of your more favored class items?
Yeah, I mean, I love being a wizard, right? And, but if you're any kind of spellcaster, and especially a warlock, you don't have a lot of spell slots, or, you're going to be conserving your spell slots sometimes all day, wondering, when you're going to use them. I mean, if you're playing a one shot like Adventures League, you can go all out. But when you're playing a campaign and you don't know when your next long rest might be, it's good to have either a Staff of Power or, at a higher level, the Staff of the Magi. It's going to give you some at-will spells. It's going to increase either your armor class or your spell casting attack rolls. So, really useful spells in there as well, including, of course, Fireball. Right? Because, I mean, we're all about Team Fireball. It's not how big is the room or who's in it. It's just I cast Fireball. It's just let's do that all day. Now you can't do that all day with these things, but you're gonna be doing it more than you did before, and in some cases at a higher level, because the staves, cast at a certain level. They're not exactly like a wand of fireballs or wand of magic missiles where you can, kind of upcast it by using a whole bunch of charges. You do have to use charges on these staves to, power these spells, but you can't upcast them per se. And I mean, although I think it kind of looks kind of ridiculous, having two staves as a wizard or something like
Warcaster.
Still, if because you do need a hand free to be doing somatic stuff.
Unless you have Warcaster.
Yeah. But I mean, if you have the material component in your hand, they say you can do the somatic with the material components.
With the material components, but not by themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
It's tricky.
It is.
So these items are obviously two of the most powerful items in 5th edition. So, I mean, don't give those to like 4th level characters. That just ruins your camp. You can't challenge them with low level stuff anymore.
Well,
and, yeah.
I mean, unless, you're giving somebody a Staff of Power and you have every intention of taking it away from them and breaking it in their face. And I'm not trying to be mean here. I'm not trying to be mean because it's one of the abilities.
Retributive Strike.
Yeah, you can basically break it, and it's got its own little explosion that's going to happen. Says here you have a 50% chance to instantly travel to a random plane of existence, avoiding the explosion. If you fail, you take force damage equal to 16 times the number of charges in the staff.
So for the Staff of Magi, that's 50 charges if it's full.
Yeah, well,
16 times 50. It's a beatdown.
Pretty crazy. But I mean, at the same time, maybe it doesn't have a lot of charges left, and the adventurers are, in a real bind, and they need to GTFO. They can hit that and just, where do they end up? Only the DM knows.
Or they're a pile of ash. One of the two.
Yeah, could happen. But hey, it's better to burn out than to fade away.
Pretty much. Let's see. We got a question. Let's check out that. So I was going to get into those specifically because there's a lot of new ones in Tasha's that do that, James, that I want to talk about very shortly, because some of those new items in Tasha's scale the spellcasting ability quite crazily. Oh, sorry, I read your question wrong. So basically, you're saying if you don't have a lot of spellcasters, if you want to give them like a wand of fireballs or something like that, it's going to help them a lot. You're going to be able to create a little bit more interesting encounters. I wouldn't go so far as to give like a low-level party lacking spellcasters like a Staff of Power or something, because
Well, they might
that's
not be
gonna,
able to attune to it either.
yeah, because they need to be a wizard, warlock, or sorcerer in order to attune to the Staff of Power or Staff of the Magi. Whereas,
But
for example, the Wand of Fireballs, they can just have any spell casting.
yeah, or even a Wand of Magic Missiles is really potent. It's
And it
gonna hit
doesn't have any
every
attunement
time.
requirements.
Yeah, so it's crazy. I mean, they should be manufacturing those for an army.
Yeah. They probably wouldn't Eberron, but
Definitely.
yeah. So if I were to pick one item that had like the strongest pound for pound magic item, I think the Staff of Power is stronger than, like, I'd say at least 3/4 of the legendary items on that list.
Oh, for sure.
And
And it's
it's only very rare.
very rare. Yeah. Amazing.
But let's talk about some little bit more practical, a little easier to implement into your campaign, subtle boosts as opposed to home run boosts. The Cloak and Ring of Protection are both just very solid items. What they do is they give you +1 to your armor class and +1 to all your saving throws. So
including death saving throws.
Including death saving throws. So if you are attuned to one of those, they're going to give you just a very subtle boost. It's not big, it's not flashy, you're not slinging fireballs all over the place, but in a game where bounded accuracy is a thing, that little bit of bonuses that you can get from the Cloak and the Ring are very, very, very potent.
Yeah. And similarly, bracers of defense for those people that aren't wearing armor. It's a simple +2.
Barbarians, monks, wizards.
Yeah.
Now, this is an item that we're going to talk about next that Jeremy and I both find interesting. I hate it.
I hate it as a DM.
Okay. Yeah. I hate it as a DM and as a player. Yeah, but it is a very, very powerful magic item, and it's called the Cube of Force.
Yeah, it's a rare item.
So why is the Cube of Force so interesting, Jeremy? And then I'll tell a story about how you shouldn't use the Cube of Force.
Yeah, okay. So the Cube of Force is really this really small thing that you can make really big, and essentially it's almost like creating a wall of force around yourself, but it's also movable. And with it, I mean, it can break some encounters like pretty easily, or even some dungeons, if there's a lot of traps and stuff like that.
Because no matter can get through, including spell effects, but somehow air gets through. Don't question that.
It's magic. Come on. It just works.
So the Cube of Force is great. It's got 6 sides. Each side that you press does a certain extra level of more awesomeness or annoyance, depending on whether or not you're the DM. You press one side, I think it just doesn't allow any vapors or anything through all the way until you're pressing 5 sides, and then nothing can get through, not even spell effects. You can't even teleport through these things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yep. So what not to do with the Cube of Force is be an 11th level cleric, run up to a Euthylarid, which is a bigger mind flayer, entrap yourself with it, trying to save the rest of the party. The rest of your party is completely fine, and you no longer have a brain because the Euthylarid is in there trapped with you.
Ouch.
Watch that happen in a game. I was playing. I couldn't believe it. Couldn't help him at all. He got stunned immediately, and it was over for him.
That's too bad.
Don't use the Cube of Force like that.
No, wow, that's sad. Wow. Let's take a moment of silence. So, other cool, magic items when it comes to weapons are a Vorpal Sword. In case you want to have a chance of just taking someone's head off and like insta killing them, if you're successful with a high roll. If you're a paladin or just looking for those weapons to go up and kill vampires with, maybe you want a Sun Sword.
Sun Sword is very specific. It's a Sun Blade. That's the more common one. It's basically a lightsaber.
Yeah. Oh, the Sun Blade is just amazing. Like, just because it is literally a lightsaber. But the Sun Sword is a legendary item, not an artifact, but it both of these weapons thematically are best against the undead. They're going to shine bright light. They're going to do radiant damage. And I mean, when you're pairing that up with smiting and such as a paladin, it just jives real well. But of course, the ultimate sword that any paladin wants is
the Holy Avenger, which is a legendary item that is incredibly good if you're a paladin or an artificer.
Everything now, right? Oh boy, yeah. Because I mean, you can only attune to it if you're a paladin, I guess. But yeah, um, it is a pretty hard item to find too. It doesn't actually show up in 5th edition that much.
I don't think that there was any one that was in print except for Tomb of Annihilation, and then they wouldn't let us have it in Adventures League.
Yeah. Yeah, it's too bad. But I mean, when you get the rollable tables, or when they were available for Adventures League and Storm King's Thunder, I think some of them were showing
A few
up
of them
that
showed
way.
up, randomly rolled, of course.
Yeah, I don't think the weapon is that OP
It's
compared
not
to.
that OP. A Vorpal Sword's almost better in most circumstances.
Yeah, so the Holy Avenger is a +3 weapon. Okay, and like a lot of magic items, it can come in different, weapon types like greatsword, longsword, rapier, scimitar, or short sword. And if you hit a fiend or undead with it, an undead, it will take an extra 2d10 radiant. That doesn't seem too OP. And then we
The
get to the
aura
next
part's really good.
section.
The aura
Yeah,
part's really good.
yeah. Because other than that, I mean, those two things alone, are kind of in line with what a sun sword is. But this last part, when you hold the drawn sword, it creates an aura 10 feet around you. You and all creatures friendly to you have advantage on saving throws against spells and other magical effects. If you have 17 or more levels in the paladin class, it's actually 30 feet instead of 10 feet radius. So yeah, it's pretty good.
It's pretty much the ultimate paladin kind of thing that wants to help their buddies out.
Yeah, definitely an end game type of item.
Oh yeah, incredibly end game.
Yeah, and anything legendary or artifact, it should generally be an end game item. Now, hey, your end game might be, in around level 10 or something like that.
Depending on how long you want your campaign to go.
Exactly. So, maybe that's when it shows up.
So after the what we like to call undead killing spread, we have one of my favorite magic items that Jeremy and I disagree on. I really like it. He really doesn't. It is one of the only magic items in the DMG that is not a sword, and it is the Oath Bow.
Mm-hmm.
So the Oath Bow is interesting. It's most of the time it's just a regular magic longbow, no plus modifier, no anything fancy. But once a day, when there's that one guy that you really need to kill, you whisper to your bow, "Swift death to you has wronged me," and it activates, and you just mess up a guy's day. You're shooting at him at advantage. You're doing 3d6 extra damage. He's having a bad time.
Yeah, the only reason why I don't like it is just because I'm the type of player, whether it's video games or RPGs, where I tend to hoard things, or even with magic item slots as a wizard. I'm always like, should I use it now? Should I use it later? Because it would suck to use the oath bow on the mini boss and not the big bad evil guy. But
We have two schools of thought on that, Jeremy and I, because if I blow up the mini boss by myself with nobody else needing to do anything, they've all got their stuff for the big boss.
All right. Okay. All right.
So we got a question from James again, who's asking a ton of questions.
Okay, well, just before we do, I just want to finish with oath bow and magic bows, because one interesting point of note is that you have like +1, 2, 3 swords, but when you have a magic bow and you have magic ammunition, you can be doing like +6 on every hit. But magic ammunition loses its magic after it's expended.
Except for unbreakable arrows, but they don't have a plus bonus.
No. Okay, let's get to questions.
So magic items in general, for the most part, don't take damage as per one of the optional rules in the DMG or Xanathar's Guide to Everything, they're considered effectively indestructible for the most part, unless they're in an anti-magic field, and even then, sometimes you can't break them
or if
anyway.
they're consumable.
The other ones are Ioun Stones, which specifically have an armor class and a hit points. Those can be broken, but if it doesn't have those, then it's completely up to your discretion. If you think in your campaign magic items should take damage.
Yeah, and again, it can be a story element. It's cool when the sword breaks, and
Yeah, the
you
Masamune
gotta
has to be
reforge it.
reforged.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Lord of the Rings too, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right, so we're finally getting to the big three from Tales of the Yawning Portal, White Plume Mountain,
Yeah.
Black Razor, Wave, and Whelm.
These are all artifacts, which means there really is only one of them in the campaign space. So whether you're playing in Greyhawk or Forgotten Realms, doesn't matter. There's only one of them. These are, some pretty potent magic items.
Unless you're in Adventures League where you could have a party of people wielding Black Razor.
That doesn't even make sense.
But
to me, that's like bringing, like a legendary creature on the table in Magic the Gathering, and you bring a copy down, they destroy each other. Like, to me, I don't like the same should be true.
yeah, absolutely. But it's just one of those things. So with Black Razor specifically, the easiest way to deal with it is to just keep like it's evil. Generally, if you're giving out Black Razor, there's got to be a reason why you're giving out Black Razor. You don't want to just be giving out that weapon and willy-nilly, because it is incredibly evil. It's incredibly powerful. I watched a barbarian have effective 900 hit points because he had something like 500 temporary hit points after killing a dragon.
Yeah, it can get insane. But
It was zany.
You are immune to charm while using it, as well as being frightened. You are not immune to possession.
Nope.
So, I mean, if you really got to deal with someone like that, have them start using it against the party.
Yeah, so with the other thing that's interesting with Black Razor is if you keep throwing consistent undead at them, eventually they're going to get annoyed, because undead deal damage back when you hit an undead with Black Razor.
Yeah, totally. Don't be using it against a
and
sword.
You lose your soul if you get to 0 hit points.
Yeah,
with that effect.
Yeah, yeah. Well, just
Black Razor's one of the three. It's probably the strongest of the three. It's the one that everybody wants. Wave and Whelm are both very good as well. It's just that Black Razor is something a little crazy, because it's a great sword and it activates great weapon master and that sort of thing.
For sure. The other cool thing too about not all artifacts, but some of them, is that they could be sentient as well. So, if Black Razor doesn't like this person anymore, they can choose not to attune to them as a GM if you don't want them to. Like, you're not worthy of me. You're not feeding me enough, especially Black Razor.
Yeah, Wave and Whelm are also very good. Wave effectively gives you a cube of force on a stick that's also a +3 trident. We've already went into detail about the cube of force, so I'm not going to go into that again. But yeah, it also gives you, it's a weapon of warning, a cap of water breathing, and a cube of force with a trident of fish command. That's also a +3 weapon. It's a lot of bag of tricks in one item. It's incredibly powerful, and it's still weaker than Black Razor. So that tells you how good Black Razor is.
It's a matter of opinion, because Black Razor's, is it going to cut through a cube of force?
Well, no, but I mean, this isn't like a who's going to win between the two. It's just in general which one is considered.
All right.
And then we got Whelm, which is, I guess, which is basically it's considered like the one that nobody ever remembers as one of the 3 big weapons. It's also incredibly powerful because it's basically a dwarven thrower. That's also got a couple of extra things, like it allows you to stun people in a DC 15 con save, that sort of thing. Which is also still very good, but it's not Wave or Black Razor, so
No.
And it has to be attuned by a dwarf, which is the other tricky part.
Yeah.
So those are the big 3 legendaries from White Plume Mountain.
Which is a great adventure. I mean, even if the players don't get those items, it's just a super fun adventure. You can kind of power through it in one kind of long session, or you could probably break it into 2 4-hour sessions and get through it, in a decent manner.
Mm-hmm. So now these items in Tasha's that have just come out recently, there's some of these that are incredibly interesting. Mainly they took basically the Rod of the Pact Keeper, which is why we haven't talked about that yet, which is the Warlock item. It adds 1 to your spell. So a plus, it comes in +1, +2, and +3. It adds 1 to your spell attacks. It adds 1 to your spell save DC, which was one of the very few
Yes.
things that did that up until Tasha's, because now in Tasha's, there's 1 for each class.
Yeah.
And they all have varying cool abilities that let them be stick out from the Rod of the Pack Keeper. So the Druids have the new Moon Sickle. It allows them to add 1d4 to every healing spell that they cast. It also can be attuned to by Rangers, but I don't know that I'd want to use that on a Ranger. But Druid, absolutely. Not that I would ever play Druid, but that's just my personal opinion. Then you got the
Amulet of the Devout, which is for clerics.
That one is bonkers because it gives you an extra channel divinity.
On top of the bonus to your spell DC.
All of these give you the same +1 to attacks, +1 to spell save DC, or 2 or 3, depending on how rare the item is. There's the wizard one, which is going to be insane because it allows you to. Well, wizard spells are just crazy in general. They're some of the strongest spells in the game because there's a lot of wizard only ones. And then it allows you to arcane recover more spell slots back. There's the sorcerer one, which gives you sorcery points when you spend hit dice. There's what are the other ones that I'm missing? There's the bard one that allows you to get back a bardic inspiration. That one's that kind of but if you really badly needed a bardic inspiration, it'd be a good way to get it. But bards have their own instruments that are already broken anyway, which we haven't touched because
good point, because we could talk about bards for a while.
So those new items in Tasha's, along with the tattoos, which are really, really cool, like the barrier tattoo, which if you get a very rare barrier tattoo, you basically have plate mail without wearing any armor.
Yeah, and they have some Fey and Shadowfell items in there too.
Mm-hmm. One of the ones that I kind of want to tinker with on a build someday, maybe, if I ever am in a campaign where I know it's going to be in there, is the Eldritch Claw one, which is basically lets you punch things or have your unarmed strikes do magical damage. And then it lets you get 15 feet reach with your fists and with inky tentacles that do force damage once a day. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be that's going to be one that I want to.
It's kind of like an Astral Monk a bit.
Kind of a bit like an Astral Monk. It's kind of like got like a bit of a Warlock theme as well, which is kind of neat.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've come to time, and we've gone through all of our questions and answered them. So I hope you've learned a thing or two, whether it's a trick or a new magic item or a way of dealing with magic items in a different way. As always, you can hit us up at unitethefactions.com, join our Discord server, or of course interact with us on fan meetups, where we have events like this monthly. Yep. And we do have a couple games at Unite the Factions coming up in May that are both good for new players.
They're both tier well, the other one has pre-gens.
And they're really good pre-generated characters if you wanted to take a try at Tier 2 Eberron. So again, check out fan meetups, and hopefully, before the end of the year, we can get back to some in-person events with fan meetups and maybe play some D&D in person.
Here's hoping, because as much as I'm enjoying playing online, I really miss being at a table.
Ditto. Got to use those minis you got back there.
Mm-hmm.
Or back there.
Yeah, you even have more huge ones than I do, which is
yeah. The new dragons they're coming out with from WizKids are pretty awesome.
Yep. So thanks again, everyone, for watching. We hope that our talk on magic items brought a little bit of insight. Obviously, there are more magic items than we discussed because there are like literally
Tons.
a couple hundred magic items in the book, and
And you can make your own. So
you can. Like everyone loves the thoughts and prayers monks raps, where one fist is thoughts and it does psychic damage, and the other one is prayers and it does radiant damage.
where is that magic item? All right, take it easy,
Take
and
care, everyone.
talk later. Bye.